Hi, everybody. Meteorologist Joe Cioffi here. If you look right behind me, on that side, is Kovu. He's back, recovered, doing very well, and he has diabetes and got out of control. So we had to take him to the vet. We brought his insulin up. They hydrated him, and now he's much better. Right, pal? Yep, there he is. So anyway, we're going to take a look at what's going on across the U.S. and where we're going with the weather this week. A lot of conflict in the models today, and it started yesterday with this pattern setting up for next week with a colder look in the east. The GFS and the European really diverge after midweek, with the European having another cold shot toward the end of the week and into next weekend, while the GFS is having none of that and just basically pulls out whatever cold air comes in Tuesday and Wednesday into Thursday, and already has things warming up with above normal temperatures by Friday. So there's a large difference there. There aren't any big storms on the horizon. A couple of weak systems that we're going to be dealing with. So overall, the pattern I would say is quiet for the most part. Still trying to get a sense of where the upper air pattern is going in the next couple of weeks as we head through the month of November and get closer to the winter months of December, January, and February. Month of October just flew by, so it's probably going to mean that the month of November is going to fly by as well, as we're getting close to Thanksgiving and Christmas, and everything just seems to fly when we get close to those holidays. So let me switch over to the video. I'll jump on the chat board, and we'll come back at the end, and we'll talk some more. So just hang on 1 second here. As we take a look at the weather activity going forward, we can look at this is the National Weather Service's map with the local offices and watches and warnings that are up, and we have winter weather advisories up for parts of interior Oregon on up through much of Washington State, even peppered right along the coast, and we have also some winter storm warnings up as you go well inland, of course, and up through northern Idaho, parts of northwestern Wyoming. A little bit of winter weather. Actually, I'm not even sure if that's a winter weather advisory. I'm thinking that might be something else, but let me just take a look and see what that is. That is a winter weather advisory. The color was the same. And we even have flash flood watches up for western New York because they got a lot of rain this week, and they're going to get some more with this next frontal system. Let's just start with taking a look at what's going on in the west. And you can see this swirl here on the satellite loop that's dropping south-southeastward off the coast of southwestern Canada on up on southward up into Washington State. Looks like it's headed that way, the low center. And we've got a lot of cold air that's trapped up in the areas pretty far westward toward the coast. And that's why you see all those winter weather advisories and winter storm warnings up. A lot of cloudiness up in the northern Rockies. And you can see the clouds that are running in the eastern part of the United States. And when you look at the eastern satellite loop, starting to see another one of these warm front, cold fronts transitions that's happening, with the warm front heading up toward the northeast and a cold front that's right behind it. So that's going to set up for another round of changes as temperatures head up Sunday into Monday and then head down Tuesday and beyond. The radar, if I have it there, I thought I had the radar up here. Well, there it is, the radar. There's precipitation. Looks like a big wave of moisture starting to come in to the west. I'm going to just move that over there so you can see it. And you can see this big wave of rain coming into the coast now to the Pacific Northwest. We've got some scattered areas of snow on up and through eastern Washington, northern Idaho. Also some scattered precipitation on up through Nevada, northeastern Nevada, to parts of Utah, back over into Wyoming. So all this is heading into Wyoming, where they have the winter storm warnings up. So most of the action in the western part of the United States. There's a little bit of action going on in the east. Some showers in the Great Lakes, this area of showers that's coming out of Virginia and Maryland ahead of the warm front. We look down toward the south, there's some scattered showers in the Carolinas. Not too much happening and hardly anything at all happening over Florida, and then back over through Texas. You got a little bit of shower activity going into West Texas, and not too much happening up as we head through up the upper Mississippi Valley until we get into northern Minnesota, where we have that snow in the area where there's a winter weather advisory up. So why don't we take a look at, I'm going to start with the upper air pattern here going forward. And, you know, the models have been kind of going in all sorts of directions. We've got that ridge in the east. Here's that trough in the west as we start off with the panel for this morning. There's that trough. It's oriented in a northeast southwest way, and as a result, you got this sort of this west to westerly flow, generally a west southwest flow, running from Baja California on up into the northeast. So that's where how that warm air is coming up. The cold air from Canada is getting deflected to the north, at least for the time being. Big ridge out in the Pacific from the Hawaiian Islands all the way up into Alaska. And we've got a ridge out in the Atlantic that is building northward as well. So we'll move it forward, and you'll see that eventually, as we move into early next week, the westerlies come down in the eastern part of the United States. We do have a flow now here in the middle of next week. Comes down from out of Canada, a wrapped up storm east of Oregon. So the flow is actually split here with the Pacific flow coming in, and then you have that separate jet that's coming down from Canada. Sometimes when you have these split flows, they can be dangerous, and you know, in this particular instance, it would have to be something that would phase. You've got this trough on Wednesday that's back over into Colorado, down over into West Texas, and that southern stream. It's an identifiable feature, but you'll notice here as we go to Thursday that the northern stream and the southern stream stay separate. So when they do that, you don't get a whole lot of intensity with the system. You don't get a lot of development when you have that phase occur. When you get a trough that looks like this, if they were to phase together, then that would be problematic. But it looks like what happens is that it really doesn't come together till it's long gone anyway. That trough here on Friday on the European is especially deep, and this brings in a shot of cold air with the European model has coming into northeast for the end of the week. Now the GFS was on board with this, but when we look at what the GFS has done, it can't even find this trough. So there's a huge difference. Look at the difference between the European, the upper air. This is at day 6, okay? So it's, you know, you do see differences sometimes, but this is a huge difference in terms of the wholesale upper air pattern. It's totally different because you have the European with this rather deep trough from just east of James Bay down along the coast in the northeast, and when we switch over to the GFS, lo and behold, it basically has more of a ridge there. The whole look, the two models are totally different here. The GFS brings in a system into the west, starts to create that west-southwest flow again. So it's done this for a couple of runs, and eventually it does bring a trough into the eastern states early on the week of November 13th, and then that lifts out. And you know, you still really don't have a real connection into Canada. But it doesn't have a very cold look to it. It doesn't necessarily have a warm look to it, but it doesn't necessarily have a cold look to it either. The European, again, different, swings that trough, swings the another rather strong shortwave next weekend into early next week into the northeast, where the GFS doesn't have any of this. So one of these models is going to be severely wrong. So it's always part of the puzzle when we deal with all this stuff. So let's look at the precip. First off, you know what? Let's go to the west, because that's where all the action is at the moment. And we'll put up the snow map for the west. and I'll back it up. We'll go back to the beginning here. So here's our snow into Monday evening. So there's a fair amount of snow in some of the higher elevations. Otherwise, most of the snow amounts aren't too bad. They're running in the 1 to 3 inch range in most places. And as we take it out through day 10, the GFS increases it somewhat. Again, most of the action in the west. We see these, green areas here of a foot plus. I guarantee you those are probably in the higher, the higher elevations, of course. But again, most of the snow activity in the next 10 days looks to be in the west. Now, in the east, by contrast, you really don't have too much happening. A little bit in the cold air up in northern New England, and maybe some scattered, snow showers in elevated areas in western New York. But again, because the GFS does not have that deep trough at the end of the week, it has a much warmer look to it. Now, I'm going to address something that the Canadian did today, which is insane. All right, the Canadian has got 1 foot plus amounts from New Jersey to southern New England. And the reason why it does this is because the Canadian, which if you remember, as I've said with tropical storms and hurricanes, how it loves to spin everything up. Well, it kind of likes to do that with snow events. And it has some kind of low coming eastward. You see it here, and a push of cold air toward the end of the forecast period by day 9. All right. The GFS, of course, has most of that shunted well to the south and doesn't have a whole lot of cold air. Most of the cold air is up to the north, but it does show some kind of a wave coming out. But you can see it here. It's weak. One wave runs up. I guess this is the reflection of what the Canadian goes crazy with. And it really doesn't do very much with that as it moves on through. The European, which we are not able to see the precip on at this point. I mean, actually, I could pull it up for you, but it doesn't really, it's not going to really be helpful. The European does have that because it has that stronger system coming out. This is for, again, a week from today and beyond. I'm sorry, a week from Monday. Has a low, an inland low that it runs up. Here it is at 192. You can barely find it. There's some evidence of low pressure here in the middle Mississippi Valley. Then it goes up into southeastern New York and then strengthens as it moves on up into Canada with a shot of cold air behind it. So, going forward, I think the best approach will be to compromise all of this at this point. The Canadian is just ludicrous. I'm not even going to bother with that. But in terms of the temperatures, show you how the models are handling temperatures in terms of above and below normal going forward. So the European is going to be colder, and we'll go back to the beginning here. So we are at Saturday. We're at this point. So, of course, it's above normal into Monday. Here comes a large area of below to much below normal temperatures into Thursday, which it swings into the eastern part of the United States. And then it tries to warm it up a little bit as we go into the first part of the week of the 12th, 13th. And then you get that system that the European develops behind it, brings down a little shot of colder air. The GFS, on the other hand, of course, is going to probably show us a warmer look. And I'll let that load. And warming up into Monday, then we go below normal. But you see, because it doesn't have that trough at the end of this week, it warms it up by Friday. This is a change. The GFS was very cold just a couple of runs ago for Friday into Saturday with temperatures in the teens and 20s throughout much of the Northeast down into the northern mid-Atlantic states. And now it's kind of gotten rid of that whole idea as it doesn't have that trough at the end of the week. So we're going to have to resolve those differences one way or another as we go forward, because it's going to be critical to the actual day-to-day forecast when we get toward, we're almost into that range here. It's only less than a week away. Meanwhile, across Europe and the British Isles, we'll take a look at your temperature anomalies here. And it looks like below normal temperatures for England and especially Ireland through this weekend. And that area advances into Western Europe. even another shot of cold air, it looks like, during next week before we get temperatures to moderate a bit late next week over the British Isles. The colder air, relatively speaking, shifts down into southern Europe, and you get another push of cold air into northern Europe, while the British Isles, again, looks like they moderate. And in terms of actual storms, we can take a look at this. Starting from today, so you've got this low in the Mediterranean Sea with a lot of snow in the Swiss and Italian Alps. That low just kind of churns away there. A couple of weather systems moving along, but it doesn't look like as we go into next weekend any big storms that we're going to have to deal with. Just nuisances. There's some kind of large storm, Atlantic storm, around day 9 that comes into the northern British Isles and into northwestern Europe. Spreading rain and showers, and then you've got areas of snow as well as you head down into the higher terrain in the Alps and so on. But overall, except for what's going on in the Mediterranean with a couple of lows that are going to be cut off down there in the upper flow, it really doesn't look all that problematic. So let's put a halt to this at this point, and I'm going to switch it back. We'll scroll through the chat, see what your questions are, and hang on 1 second. He's here. You can see him here. So you know he's feeling better when he wants to be on camera. He's in good shape, or better shape anyway. Yeah, it's really tough. He had a rough couple of days, but he seems to have bounced back pretty well. So hopefully the increased insulin will keep him healthy. Now, let's look at what we're going to be dealing with going forward. I just want to point out, let's get used to it now. The Canadian model and also the GFS model is going to do it too. We're going to start to see these models spin up snowstorms all over the place, especially in the eastern part of the United States in the long range. They're really not going to have much value from terms of a forecast tool, because that is ultimately a short range problem. So just bear that in mind when you look at these models on your own, either at tropicaltidbits.com or at weather.us. Those are two good sites to use. Just bear that in mind, and I would not, make plans on a long range, 7 to 10 day snow map. You might, when you want to use it in terms of a broad brush, if you're trying to, get a general sense of, where the deep snow cover is or going to be and where things are likely to fall. But in terms of specific numbers, I wouldn't do it. And even from the standpoint of just getting a general idea for your own area, there's a fairly high probability that it's going to be wrong. Yeah, Ellen Abraham, what's up with the Canadian model? It's, what? I don't know. I don't know, whether there's, do they do upgrades? Have they done upgrades over the last couple of years? I haven't really seen anything that says that they have, but that doesn't necessarily mean that isn't the case. I'm sure some of you that might, you weather geeks among you who follow this stuff closely. I mean, the only time I ever hear of an upgrade is if somebody tweets it, and then word kind of gets around. But I have not ever heard anybody say that the Canadian model is being upgraded or being tweaked. So I'll have to do a little research on that. Esme, good evening to you. How does the US show so much of the European? Jason, I actually asked them that question, and apparently, they have some arrangement with them that allows them to share. I think because they altered the maps to a large degree to make it more their own interpretations of what the European model than the actual model itself, that there's no problem. I actually had a conversation with them yesterday about it because, I get a little nervous with this sort of stuff. Keep Kovo on camera here. I get a little nervous with this sort of stuff. I don't like to share, things haphazardly. I always ask, and I had asked them if it was all right before I did start using it, and they said it was perfectly fine. So Um, the reason they gave, but I think it sounds plausible to me. Uh, they do whatever alterations they do to make it more their own in terms of the look. So there apparently is no objection. So that is good. And yes, Leon, the cat is back. So uh, we'll end it here at this point, since the weather is quiet. I'm going to save my energy and my voice for when activity picks up, which it ultimately will. And we'll see how the models do during the overnight. Don't forget daylight saving time, which they should get rid of altogether, ends, and we go to standard time, which is wonderful for us because by the time when we get into these storm situations, if I cut a video late at say 11:30 or midnight, the bulk of the GFS run will be done. And if I feel like staying up for the European, I don't have to stay up till 3 in the morning to see it. It'll start running at 1. And when the stuff gets into the short range, I could have the whole thing, have it all looked at least by 1:30. So that is a big plus for me, because I don't stay up till 3 a.m. for weather models unless it was like a major league event. So I'm liking the fact that it's out an hour early. So that's good news. So don't forget, and it's daylight saving time, not daylight savings time. It's not plural. You're saving time and you're saving daylight, allegedly. That's a whole nother debate for another day. All right, folks, have a great evening. Hope your weekend is going good. Take care for Sunday. We'll live stream tomorrow evening, of course, and we will see you then.